faculties as well as the students. We once again welcome you all for this Regain PG program. Today it will be the seventh chapter that we are doing consistently on every Monday. So it's an honor to welcome once again our moderator Dr. A.K. Balaji for this program, as well as Dr. T.S. Rana, Dr. Ashwini ji, other seniors also. So now I request Dr. Balaji to introduce the external examiner as well as the student, and then finally start the program. Good morning, sir. Please, over to you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Microlab for helping us in this academic endeavor by Jandaram Hospital Department of Nephrology. So on behalf of Department of Nephrology, I welcome everybody. In fact, almost 2 months, we have been regularly doing every Monday this clinical bedside discussion. The main target is for exam going students. So all DM and DNB students from all over India, they look forward to this bedside every Monday morning from 9 to 10:30. And we have every time a new guest faculty, a very experienced guest faculty, and which helps in the preparation for exam. And we are fortunate to have Professor Ravindra Prabhu from Head of Department of Nephrology, Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, who will be taking today's bedside. He is a very experienced examiner. I am sure all of you will learn from his bedside, and you will have various questions the way these are asked in the exam. On an average, we have 150 registration who attend this bedside, not only from India, but from Nepal, Bangladesh, and other countries. So I'm sure this will benefit a lot. Professor Prabhu, please. The presentation is by Dr. Ganesh from Narayan Hridaya Hospital from Bangalore.
Good morning.
Sir, good morning, sir.
At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Balla for this, for including me in this very popular program, and I hope that we'll have a very fruitful discussion. Without much delay, I will request Dr. Ganesh to go ahead with his presentation.
Sir, can you unmute yourself and then start speaking? Dr. Ganesh? Yeah.
Sir, good morning, sir. Sorry, sir. Sir, today I am presenting a case of Mrs. Chennamma, who is a 65-year-old female homemaker. She didn't receive any formal education. She came from Anekal, Bangalore. History given by herself and son. Complaints of history of snake. She came with chief complaints of history of snake bite over her right hand on 17th of May 2020. Swelling of right upper limb, hematemesis, and melena. History of presenting illness. Patient was apparently all right till May 17th. On May 17th, she was bitten by a snake while doing her household work in the backyard. However, she couldn't identify the snake as it ran away. She was taken to a nearby primary healthcare center where she received initial management, but she did not receive ASV as the caregivers couldn't identify any fang marks and there were no symptoms of any envenomation at that time. She was sent home after a few hours, but that night she started developing swelling in the right arm, and by early morning she also had 3 episodes of hematemesis and 1 episode of melena. There is no history of epistaxis, no history of hematuria, no history of discoloration of the limbs. There is no other signs, other places bleeding diathesis. There is no history of drooping of eyelids or blurring of vision. There is no history of weakness of limbs, breathing difficulty. She was brought to ER with above said complaints, and she was managed with anti-snake venom, and she also transfused blood products. She said she was received both RBCs and I think plasma also. As she said, they given white color products, blood products also. She was not aware of her blood pressure at this point of time, and however, her right limb, upper limb swelling was managed conservatively. She was shifted to ICU, and during her ICU stay, she was told that her creatinine is high and the kidneys are not working properly. The next day, patient had a, low urine output, which is less than 300 ml per day, and swelling of the legs and breathing difficulty with worsening of creatinine, for which she was started on hemodialysis through right neck vein temporary catheter. Over next few days, patient had further reduction in her urine output to less than 50 ml per day, and she used to have daily breathlessness, for which she was requiring a daily hemodialysis. Over period of next 1 week, her breathlessness has settled and the swelling of the legs has reduced. Swelling of the right upper limb also reduced with the conservative management. Patient required a total 13 sessions of HD during her hospital stay, and also during the hospital stay, she was told that she is having high BP, and she was also received medications for her high blood pressure. She received last dialysis on May 1st. During this period, her output till May 1st, her urine output slightly increased to 300 ml per day, and over the next few days, her urine output further increased to 800 to 1000 ml per day till last, and her creatinine was improved slowly and reached an nadir of 2.8. She was not requiring any hemodialysis since May 1st, and her temporary catheter was removed. Past history: there is no history of diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, chronic kidney disease, or cerebrovascular accident in the family. Personal history: she consumes mixed diet, and as of now her appetite is reduced but sleep is adequate. Bladder: she's having urine output of around 800 ml per day. There are no incontinence or any other bladder issues. Her bowel habits are normal. She doesn't have any addictive habits. Obstetric and menstrual history: she has 7 children. All are full-term normal vaginal delivery. There were no complications during pregnancy. She attained menopause 15 years back. Family history: there is no history of diabetes, hypertension, or CKD in the family. Sir, shall I summarize the cases?
Yeah, please summarize.
Sir, here is an elderly lady with with nil comorbidities, presented with history of snake bite and cellulitis of right upper limb, bleeding diathesis in form of hematemesis and melena, initially treated with AST and other supportive measures. Later, during the hospital stay, developed oliguric renal dysfunction, for which required hemodialysis. Now in recovering phase with urine output of around 1 liter and off hemodialysis since past 10 days, and decreasing trend of serum creatinine. My provisional diagnosis is acute kidney injury, KDIGO stage 3, in the recovering phase, with probably secondary to acute tubular necrosis, secondary to snake bite envenomation, and with history with right upper limb cellulitis and upper GI bleed.
So basically here it's not a diagnostic issue. We know that the snake bite is there, and she has developed an acute kidney injury. We have to discuss more on about the snake bite, about its epidemiology and other things. Some of the points in your history, what are the important points which will determine the outcomes in this issue?
Sir,
the final outcome of the patient, what will be the important points in the history which will determine the final outcomes in this?
Sir, one is yes, sir. Especially younger patient, children and elderly are more affected for renal dysfunction, sir. And
no, more than the age. In this particular situation, timing is the most important thing. So yes, your timing should be very correct. So what timing I'm talking about, which
sir,
you should take in the history exactly?
Sir, the administration of antivenom, sir. The early we administer antivenom, yes, the risk of AKI is reduced.
Yes. So we have what is called as a bite to needle time. So in your history, you should get that time out very clearly. You just told that on 17th May that bite was there. Exact time will be known. Is
Okay.
it
Okay.
or approximate time is there? And then you
It
told the
it
ASV
was
was
morning,
not
sir.
given, but
Yes.
yeah. So from that time on to the time of the ASV given, what is the difference in the time or the delay in the time?
Sir, almost 16 to 18 hours she was delayed, sir.
Yeah. So up to what time the response will be good if you give the ASV? Within how
Sir,
much time if you give?
first within 3 hours, sir. Within 3 hours,
Within
patient.
2. Yes, it should be within 2 hours. It should be within 2
Okay.
hours.
Okay.
Now the snake has not been identified here.
Yes.
So from the history, can we know which snake is it, or which type of snake is it, or are you aware of the different syndromes, which
Yes,
or
sir.
the different toxins which the snake bite can cause?
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir, probably this is viper snake, sir.
Okay, which type of viper?
Sir, Russell's viper, sir.
Are you aware of what is the big four? What we call as the big four?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell me that. In
Sir,
fact, the venom's anti-venom is against that.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, big four are Russell's viper
Correct.
and Indian kite.
Yes. Russell's viper, crate, then
Cobra, sir.
cobra. Yes. And one more?
Sir, one more is another viper only.
Yeah, that is a saw-scaled viper, or
Yes,
what
sir.
is called as Echis carinatus.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
Russell's
sir.
viper, saw-scaled viper, cobra, and crate. So
Crate.
each of these is supposed to produce a particular type of syndrome. So can you
Yes,
just highlight those syndromes?
Sir, Russell's viper, it has both bleeding manifestations and neurological manifestations also it can have. And Russell's viper is associated with AKI. Around 20 to 30% patients will have AKI, sir.
So that is one syndrome. If you have
Yes,
a
sir.
combination of a neurotoxicity with the hemotoxicity, with or without an acute kidney injury, or if
Yes,
you
sir.
have just a paralysis with the change in color of the urine, cola colored urine, these describe two types
Yes.
of syndrome which will take you towards that it's the Russell's viper in situations where
Yes,
you
sir.
have not seen or you cannot identify. What are the other syndromes?
Sir, cobra mainly present with neurological manifestations, sir.
Yeah, cobra and crate both will present with neurological, but what is the difference
Yes,
between
sir.
them?
Sir, exact difference I don't know.
So in a cobra, you will have a local swelling with the
Tissue necrosis
neurological.
is more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you may have a local swelling with this paralysis. You think of the cobra, whereas if it is just
Right,
paralysis,
not much local
so
swelling.
sometimes the patient is so this situation happens if the person is sleeping on the ground, and next day comes to the
Yes, sir.
paralysis. You don't you have to search for the bite mark. So such situation we see with the crates,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you have only a hemotoxicity with the less chance of the acute kidney injury, then we think of
Soft-scaled viper.
so we think of the saw-scaled viper. So these are the big four which we see, and the antivenom is against that. But of course, each
Yes.
region has its own types
Yes.
of snakes. For example, in our place, we have this
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
king cobra, we have the hump-nosed viper or the Malabar viper. You cannot have the antivenom, so you just have to give the supportive treatment. Other thing is there may be overlap between these syndromes, but more or less we think of this like here we have a hemotoxicity with acute kidney injury. We go in favor of a Russell's viper. So other thing about your history is there should be a better description of the bite site according to the history.
Yes.
So you are aware of local envenomation versus systemic envenomation. So how do we differentiate between these two things?
Sir, local envenomation only there will be cellulitis of the bitten site will be there, sir.
Okay. But how do we decide? How do we decide that, okay, this is a dangerous thing? It's increasing or something like that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, the rapidity of the increase in the swelling and the length of the increase in the swelling we consider, sir. Based on the if the within the one joint limit, it is a local envenomation. If it crosses the one joint, then it is called systemic envenomation.
Yeah, one is the extent of the swelling. So if the extent of the swelling is increasing every 15 minutes, or it crosses a joint, or it is covering half the limb, then we say that it is it's a moderate envenomation, or it is a spreading envenomation. Other things are, what are the other features?
Sir, if there is a associated tissue necrosis is there, then it is a systemic necrosis, systemic envenomation, sir.
Yeah, so if there is a blistering, if you start seeing the hemorrhagic blisters, or there is a bruising in the form of ecchymosis coming, then again we think of that it is it requires an ASV. So this is a situation where we would think it requires an ASV. Now, what will be the symptoms which tell you that it is systemic envenomation?
Sir, patient with neurological manifestations like drooping of eyelids or blurring of vision or diplopia, mainly diplopia due to 3-4-6 paralysis. And if patient had quadriparesis, or if patient is having respiratory paralysis, patient is having breathing difficulty and CO2 retention, then these are neurological manifestations of systemic envenomation.
So those are late signs. Those are late signs. Early symptoms will be what? What will be the early symptoms?
Vomiting, sir. Main vomiting they will have, sir. Early vomiting they will have.
So, nausea, abdominal pain, and vomiting. Vomiting is correct, but just the appearance of a nausea, abdominal pain, and vomiting. And other than that, certain subtle signs. The patient will complain of fatigue. They may complain of numbness on the face, loss of taste, and headache. So these are the things which tell that it is going in for a systemic. Other than that, you can have bleeding manifestations. So which are the bleeding manifestations which you are looking for?
Sir, intracranial bleed, epistaxis, GI bleed, and any hematomas in the limbs.
The first thing we see is a continuous ooze which is occurring from the fang marks.
Yes,
so if the ooze is not stopping within 20 minutes, that means it has become systemic. Or next you have other area bleeds, like you told, hematemesis or melena, epistaxis, and of course it can be in any areas. Usually we see it as a subarachnoid hemorrhage, or just spontaneously occurring hematomas or ecchymosis in other areas of the body. So those are the bleeding manifestations. Okay, then regarding the kidney itself, what is the okay, you can go ahead with the examination, then we can have a discussion on that.
Okay, thanks. Sir, here we have an elderly lady who is moderately built and nourished, conscious, cooperative, and well-oriented to time, place, person. Vitals, pulse 68 beats per minute, regular in rhythm, normal in volume and character. Condition of vessel was normal. There was no thickening. All peripheral pulses are felt equally. Blood pressure is 150/80 in both arms, sitting posture, and there was no postural drop. Respiratory rate 16 breaths per minute. She was afebrile. She had pallor. There is no lymphadenopathy or edema, no icterus and no cyanosis. Local examination, right upper limb, there are no signs of gangrene or necrosis of the right upper limb, and there is no swelling. She had the fang marks were very faint, which I couldn't point out clearly. Systemic examination, cardiovascular system, JVP is not raised. First and second heart sounds heard normally. There is no gallop rhythm, no murmurs, or no pericardial rub. Respiratory system examination, resonant node was present on percussion all over the lung field. Bilateral normal vascular bed sounds heard, and there are no added sounds. CNS central nervous system examination, Fundus was normal. Cranial nerves were normal. No, there is no signs of extraocular paralysis. No focal neurological deficit. Coming to abdominal examination, abdomen is soft. There is no organomegaly and there is no free fluid. Normal bowel sounds heard. There is no venous harm or any bruit heard.
So what are the positive points you got from the history? I mean, from the examination?
Sir, only she is having pallor, sir.
Okay. Anemia is there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here the oliguria. So one more thing you should have taken the history would be a history of, you have already mentioned that about the comorbidities which are there, especially at this age. And more than that, if she is on any medications or not for any problem like hypertension, which could impact on this situation, especially ACE inhibitors. If she is on any ACE inhibitors or if she has received any NSAIDs, the nephrotoxic agents are there. So
I asked her, sir. She said no. They said no. She didn't. She was not on any regular medications, and she didn't receive any other medications other than.
So, what is your diagnosis now?
Sir, my diagnosis is acute kidney.
Your diagnosis changed. Yeah.
Sir, only extra I added anemia, sir. Extra diagnosis is associated anemia is also there. Other than that,
okay.
Same, sir.
So your diagnosis is a vasculotoxic snake bite with acute kidney injury stage 3.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So can you just elaborate on the how the snake bite causes acute kidney injury?
Sir, sir, snake bite pathophysiology is, sir. One is direct venom. Direct venom, it can cause nephrotoxicity, or it can cause indirect effects like hemodynamic instability with the shock, or it will cause the because of increased coagulation activity, there will be microthrombi formed in the capillaries, especially in the glomeruli, which causes acute injury. It can cause through increased cytokine storm and oxidative stress, and there will be activation of the venom activated macrophages which act on the kidney tissue, which results in the renal damage, and it can also cause hypersensitivity either to the venom proteins itself or to the antivenoms. These are the proposed mechanisms.
In an acute, when we say acute kidney injury, how do we actually classify it?
Sir, acute kidney injury. Yes, sir. Acute kidney injury, it can be due to acute tubular necrosis, or it can be due to acute cortical necrosis, or it can be due to papillary necrosis.
In general, I'm asking, if I say acute kidney injury, how do we classify that?
Sir, based on the KDIGO staging, sir. KDIGO staging, sir.
No, that is staging. That is staging.
Yes, sir. Sir, pre-renal, yes, sir. Pre-renal, renal, and post-renal.
Okay. So, in this situation, is there a pre-renal component for a snake bite?
Yes, sir. She had hematemesis and melena requiring multiple blood products, so there may be some volume loss also, which might be contributed.
So, first thing is hypovolemia. So, you have a hypovolemia, which may be due to
vomiting, hematemesis. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there is a loss from the gut and there is a bleed also. What are the other reasons for a pre-renal issues in this situation?
Sir, because of cellulitis, there can be compartment syndrome, which leads to sequestration of the fluid into the one limb, which results in decrease in effective circulatory volume.
Compartment syndrome, but that it won't cause that much of volume loss, especially if it is in the upper limb. Of course, in the thigh and all, it can be there, but in the upper limb, it may not be that great. What are the other reasons for a pre-renal acute kidney injury in this situation?
So not sure.
What does the venom release? What component of the venom is there which can cause a pre-renal kind of AKI? The classical pre-renal is hypovolemia, but there are other reasons for a pre-renal.
Yes, sir. Sir, there can be sympathetic nervous system loss results in autonomic neuropathy and cardiogenic shock.
No, basically, why there is a swelling and oozing which occurs in the limb? What component of the venom would cause that?
Sir, phospholipase A2, sir.
No, it is called as the hemorrhagin or a zinc. It is a zinc metalloproteinase. So what
Yes,
does
sir.
that do? What does that do?
No, sir, not sure, sir.
No, what could be the reason for a swelling to occur anywhere? Localized swelling.
Sir, because of endothelial dysfunction, which results in break in the vascular permeability, results in extravasation of the fluid.
Yeah, that's correct. So what it does is it shrinks the endothelial cells. The junctions are gone, and
Yes,
the permeability increases. This hemorrhaging does that, and so the same effect in the rest of the body will cause.
extravasation.
Yeah, so it causes a capillary leak-like syndrome. Capillary
Okay.
leak syndrome. So there is a
Okay.
loss of fluid to the extravascular space, and plus at the same time there will be vasodilatation occurring in the splanchnic and the pulmonary vasculature. So
Yes, sir.
pooling of blood occurs there, and there is a relative hypovolemia. So that can cause a pre-renal AKI-like situation, something like in
Yes.
what happens in sepsis. So what are the other reasons for a pre-renal AKI in this snake bite situation?
Sir,
Any other reasons can be there for pre-renal AKI?
other reasons. Okay. Sir, if the patient has received any NSAIDs, there will be loss of autoregulatory effect.
Yeah, those are precipitants for a pre-renal, like NSAIDs, IV contrast, or the patient is on
Yes.
ACE inhibitors, and then he
Yes.
has a hypovolemic insult, you can get. But that is not usually seen here unless the patient has been on that or has received. But
Yes.
I'm looking for some other thing. So there are some toxins which can depress the myocardium. So these people can get a myocarditis, and the heart failure like situation can occur, which can cause a pre-renal kind of AKI. And this thing is almost immediate. So how fast does this pre-renal occur?
Sir, pre-renal usually within 4 to 6 hours, sir.
It's almost immediate. Within about 30 minutes, this thing starts. So even if there is no bleed as such, these patients can present with a low blood pressure to the hospital.
Okay.
Low means below 90 millimeters of mercury, or they may have a syncope or giddiness, because this effect of this hemorrhaging is almost very fast, very immediate.
Okay.
So need not be. So then the issue of the bleeding manifestation comes. That takes about 3 hours to 6 hours. So starting with the oozing from the limb itself, and then you could have bleeding from other areas. So just to recapitulate, the pre-renal is either due to vasodilatation, pooling of blood occurring in the splanchnic and pulmonary, or it could be due to hypovolemia due to the bleeding which occurs, or third is a myocardial depression. And of course, if the patient is has received NSAIDs or other things, this may get precipitated. Then we come to the renal part. In the renal part, what are the things which can be the?
Sir, there can be because of this formation of fibrin clot, fibrin thrombi in the glomeruli.
Injury.
Sir, because of formation of fibrin thrombi in the glomeruli, there can be because of this rhabdomyolysis due to compartment syndrome, or it could be due to hemolysis. There will be tubular damage, and because of
renal, whenever we describe a renal, you can go in a systematic way. So which are the 4 compartments which you would, so that it's easier to remember. So how will you,
Okay.
which are the 4 compartments, kidney?
Sir, glomerulus, tubules, interstitium, and vascular compartments.
Okay. So in each of these, as per the commonality you tell.
Sir, glomerulus, we can see necrotizing vasculitis can be there.
What is the most common issue we get here in a snake bite situation?
Sir, thrombosis of the glomeruli.
No, it is a acute tubular necrosis. So if you see series, the most common pathology you would see is a ischemic ATN. It is just that pre-renal part, again, as I told, it's the bite to needle time. If the pre-renal part has not been taken care of, the person can go in for ATN. So supposing this lady had come within 1 hour and received the fluids and the ASV, she wouldn't have gone in for the AKI because that ATN part would have not occurred at all. It's just the fact that she went in late that she ended up on this kind of 13 sessions of dialysis. So ischemic ATN is present in almost 70 to 80% of these patients. Is the commonest pathology which you will see. The next common is?
Sir, acute cortical necrosis.
Yeah, that is another thing that will come to that later, ACN. Then, what are the other lesions which can be seen here, which are less common, but for completion's sake, we should know that.
Sir, we can see acute interstitial nephritis.
Okay.
So there can be papillary necrosis. There can be necrotizing.
Post-renal. Yes, in the glomerulus, what can you see in the glomerulus commonly?
Sir, there can be simple mesangial proliferation, or there can be a DPGN or NTGN pattern like picture can be there.
What is the description given? So basically, the earliest lesions which you will see will be a mesangiolysis. Mesangiolysis. So mesangiolysis means?
Sir, swelling of the mesangial cells.
No, there is a, I mean, it's a, it won't be seen. The matrix and the cells will not be seen, it's lysed. So what happens because of that? What the mesangium does in the glomerulus is?
Sir, it plays role in tubular glomerular feedback, and it has a supporting role for the capillaries. Supporting role for capillary.
It basically supports the glomerular capillaries. So if there is a lysis of the mesangium, what will happen?
Collapse of the capillaries will be there.
No, actually they will become dilated. Because support is not there, they will become dilated and initially empty. Later on, they will get filled with.
Blood.
Yes. So they will get filled with blood, and also blood means RBC or sometimes platelets. And then there will be the next thing that happens, which you can see there will be. So you get a bloodless glomeruli, which will later on get. That is after 2 months. If you are having a biopsy there, you may see that it may get filled with some proliferative material. There will be thickening of the
basement.
Yes, there may be a thickening of the glomerular basement membrane because of expansion of the subendothelial space. So what are the other things which we can see there in the glomerulus? Apart from this mesangiolysis, you told about a thrombotic microangiopathy. So a thrombotic microangiopathy will manifest as in the pathology.
Sir, there will be endothelial swelling, and there will be fibrin thrombi with RBCs, sir. Crenated RBCs will be there. and endothelial swelling will be there, and there will be deposition of the mucin substance.
Yes. Is seen in the mesangium or in the capillary, yeah, or there may be an interposition of the mesangium into the basement membrane. And where exactly we'll see the thrombi in this situation?
Subendothelial.
Yes, subendothelial, and more commonly in the
Arteriole.
in a TMA. Yeah, it will be an
Arteriole, sir.
intra-arteriolar. So the
Yes,
arteriolar intima gets affected, and you may
Yes,
get luminal thrombus. So in that situation, the glomerulus may even contract. Okay, and the post-renal interstitium, as you told, acute interstitial nephritis is there, and in the post-renal there are case reports of what you have mentioned it already. It's a papillary necrosis, so it may be there. It should be looked for in this situation. So, what is the pathophysiology of all this? How all these things develop?
Sir, it may be due to oxidative stress and inflammation, and it may be because of hemolysis and myoglobinuria. Because of rhabdomyolysis, they will have tubular damage, and there can be increased cytokine storm and activated venom activated macrophages, which damage the uh, uh, renal tissues, interstitium.
Oh, basically, which are the pathways which get affected? Means the basic problem here is a hemotoxicity or a vasculotoxicity. The vasculotoxicity is due to these proteinases, but the hemotoxicity is due to which pathway gets affected here most commonly?
Sir, because of the heme in the tubules will lead to oxidative stress.
Now, basically, it's not an oxidative stress. It is a coagulation pathway which gets affected. So a situation like a DIC will occur. So it is called as a venom-induced consumptive coagulopathy. Venom-induced consumptive coagulopathy. So which part of the pathway is affected?
Sir,
Intrinsic, extrinsic.
sir, it is intrinsic pathway, sir. Intrinsic pathway. Sir.
Yes, intrinsic. Whereas in DIC it will be, if it's a classic DIC, the pathway is extrinsic. Here it's an intrinsic, and
intrinsic
so it
pathway,
has been identified that yes, here it's an intrinsic
factor
pathway.
5 and 7. Factor 5 and 7.
No, usually the Russell's Viper, it affects the factor 10, and the other vipers can affect the prothrombin. So these get consumed, and then fibrinogen gets consumed, and you have clot formation. But the problem here is those clots are unstable. They are unstable clots. So you have a situation where there is thrombosis and also bleeding. There is a clot formation. The clot is unstable, so bleeding is occurring. Plus, there is a consumption. So you will have a situation which is like a DIC, but it is due to some other pathophysiology which is occurring here. And so coming to the tubules, apart from the ATN, what else you can expect? There is an ATN. What else you can expect?
So there will be cast in the tubules, sir, because of myoglobin and hemoglobin, hemolysis.
No, I'll just reframe the question. The ATN is due to what causes acute tubular necrosis? What are the different causes for the acute tubular necrosis that occur here?
So because of the ischemia, sir, because of the ischemia and
that is the commonest cause. The ischemia because of the hypotension and also the redistribution of the blood. There can be renal hypoperfusion plus some factors which cause the renal vasoconstriction. So these can cause an ischemia, which is more affecting the proximal tubules. Apart from that,
so sepsis induced.
What are the other causes of ATN?
Sir, hemotoxin induced ATN.
Yes. Hemotoxin, which causes?
Tubular damage, sir.
That's what is that hemotoxin? Means how will you know that this has occurred? It's classically
Sir,
seen with the Russell's viper.
sir, the tubular cells will be there will be that fragmentation of the nucleoli will be there, sir, and
No, which is
deposition
the
of the
endogenous toxin? Which is the endogenous toxin which is causing this?
exact not sure.
The hemoglobin. There's a hemoglobinuria which occurs.
Yes,
There's
sir.
an intravascular hemolysis which occurs, and hemoglobinuria will be there. Specifically, there may be a iron toxicity also because of the hemoglobin leak into the urine. So hemoglobinuria. Another toxin is endogenous toxin. I think I already
Myoglobin.
mentioned it.
Myoglobinuria.
Myoglobinuria. So some of these enzymes with the venom releases can cause muscle damage and muscle necrosis. Release of the creatinine kinase is there, and the creatinine kinase rises. Myoglobin comes into the urine. So which are the situations where this can be precipitated? This hemoglobinuria and myoglobinuria, classically in which situation it gets precipitated?
Sir, like patient is having compartment syndrome or
No, those are the causes. Like those are the causes.
Okay.
The non-traumatic rhabdomyolysis, but there must be precipitants. So just if a person gets a trauma,
hypovolemia.
he's not going to
Yes, sir. Patient with hypovolemia, sir. If there is a hypovolemia, then it will get precipitate, sir.
correct.
And if
Hypovolemia and one more.
acidosis, sir. Acidosis, sir.
Yes. Yeah. So hypovolemia and acidosis must be present for the tubular damage to
Happen, sir.
occur.
Happen.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So one more situation which you mentioned was the acute cortical necrosis. So is this
Yes,
similar to the ischemic ATN?
Sir, it's mainly because of the vascular compartment involvement, sir. Because of vascular compartment involvement, there will be loss of cortical tissue.
Mm-hmm. No, what I'm asking is is it similar to, like, both are due to ischemia, or there is something
No.
more to this acute cortical necrosis? It's a classical thing which is mainly described from our country only.
Yes, sir.
This acute, which seems to be more common in our area, and
Yes,
when much of the literature comes from India for this entity.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir,
how is it different from the acute tubular necrosis?
Sir, it's there will be endothelial damage and increased fibrin thrombus formation, which results in necrosis rather associated with ischemia. Sir, it's not just ischemia.
Okay. So, what are the theories for the development of that?
Exactly, not sure.
Which situations we classically get this acute cortical necrosis apart from the snake bite?
Sir, pregnancy-related AKI.
Yeah, postpartum renal failures.
Postpartum hemorrhage. Yes, sir.
Yes, if
Postpartum
there is a postpartum hemorrhage. Apart from that,
yes, sir.
more classical situations.
Sir, postpartum hemorrhage, snake bite, and
like abruptio placenta, placenta previa,
abruptio
and
placenta.
septic
Yes,
abortions. Septic abortions. And severe hemolysis like HELP syndrome. This thrombotic microangiopathies in the setting of pregnancy is the classical highest level of acute cortical necrosis which you will see. Apart from that, of course, the next comes the snake bite. And which other situations you can get this acute cortical necrosis?
Sir, renal artery thrombosis.
No, that is a renal artery thrombosis is a infarction. It's a different situation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Acute cortical necrosis is a very classical situation. Pregnancy, snake bite. Can you get it in? Transplant?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In hyperacute rejection, there will be there, sir. In hyperacute rejection.
Yes, yes. Now, classically in hyperacute rejection. So These are the three classical situations. Apart from that, in children, it is common if the child goes with a severe dehydration and sepsis.
Yes, sir, sure.
This ACN can be
Yes.
occurring, but more or less we see it in very specific situations of pregnancy, this snake bite and this rejection. So, which gives us some idea about what may be the pathogenesis. So, are you aware of a thing called as the Schwartzman phenomenon?
Yes, sir.
Yes. What is that Schwartzman phenomenon?
Sir, Schwarzman phenomenon is because of activation of the complement system and endothelial damage.
No. Means what is that phenomenon? It's an immunological phenomenon, classically described with.
Sir, preeclampsia, sir.
No, it is an endotoxin. So when we inject an endotoxin into an animal, it will incite the
inflammation, sir. Inflammation.
No, this goes to the coagulation pathway. So whenever we give this thing immune toxin, you can either go for the inflammation or coagulation. This seems to enter the coagulation pathway, so that it will cause an intravascular thrombosis.
Thrombosis.
But the thrombus, these are small thrombi. These thrombi will be then eaten up, and the vessel becomes patent again. But if you give the endotoxin a second time, there seems to be a block in the reticuloendothelial system. The thrombi remain in the same place, and that will cause organ damage. So it's a two-hit. Schwarzman phenomenon is a two-hit phenomenon where second time endotoxin is given, the thrombus is not removed, and there will be an organ ischemia. But in certain situations like this or in the pregnancy, a single hit is enough to cause the thrombus which is not removed. So there is a intravascular thrombosis which will cause this kind of necrosis. So basically there are other theories are just an intense vasospasm. So intense vasospasm which can cause this kind of necrosis. Second is this coagulation like this intravascular thrombosis, and third theory is immune theory is there for this acute cortical necrosis. But certainly it is different from the ischemic ATN. And what will we see? What will we see in the kidney?
Sir, on histopathology, there will be ghost cells will be there, sir. The cellular nature will be lost. Only the borders of the glomerulus and the tubules will be there. So only ghost cells will be there.
Yeah, that's a late phenomenon. There are different as per the time we say different things will be there. So in one word, if I have to tell, what will we see?
Sir, necrosis will be there.
Which type of necrosis?
Not sure.
It's a coagulative necrosis. Necrosis. So that coagulative necrosis may be sometimes very focal in nature, or it may be just a minor, one small part of the kidney may be involved, or it may be patchy, or diffuse, or confluent. So 5 descriptions are there for the acute cortical necrosis: either a focal, minor, patchy, diffuse, and confluent. So this kind of thing. The confluent means the whole cortex is gone. What is the classical feature which is seen? If you take out the kidney and then section it, what is the classical feature which is seen here, which you can then see on an imaging also?
That double ring enhancement will be there, sir. Medulla will be hyper intense than the cortex.
No, because of
Sir, there will be only vessel supply to the pericapsular pericortical capsule will have vessel blood supply, and medulla will have blood supply, but there won't be enhancement in the cortex. So that a double ring appearance.
There is a yes, you're right. There is a relative sparing of the small area under the capsule and a small area just at the juxtamedullary part. So which gives the classical appearance of a central type of coagulative necrosis with sparing in these two, and that can be then seen on the imaging part.
Imaging.
So we have told about the pre-renal, you have told. The renal, more or less, you have described different things can be there. What are the other lesions which can be seen in the glomerulus? Which are
Sir,
not that common, but just...
Sir, diffuse proliferative glomerulonephritis and membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis can be there.
No, even a crescentic glomerulonephritis has been described with the snake bite. So as you told, it's a proliferative lesion may be there, and there can be a crescentic glomerulonephritis. What are the other ways in which the kidney can be involved? Which
Sir,
we should think of in this. You have described the ways in which venom causes. Any other way?
Yes. Sir, this post-renal papillary necrosis causing obstruction can be
that
there.
you have told already.
Yes. No, not sure. Don't know.
So one thing is sometimes this classically we see the DIC like picture or a consumptive coagulopathy, but usually that consumptive coagulopathy will disappear in 2 or 3 days, but there will be a persistence of a thrombotic microangiopathy. So a TMI like situation, or some people will have isolated TMI. It's not very common. It's seen in about 10 to 15% of people, but you can have a thrombotic microangiopathy solely there, and that can also cause a acute kidney injury or an acute kidney disease as such. And one more situation which we should not forget is that the ASV itself, the anti-snake venom itself, is an immune product.
Allergic interstitial nephritis.
Yes, so it can cause a serum sickness like illness, which may be immediate or can present after many days, sometimes after 2 weeks, with a classical fever, chills, myalgias, and there may be neurological and renal involvement, which can occur after some days of the ASV being given to the patient. So how do we now manage this patient?
Sir, mainly we have to give ASV as early as possible. 10 vials. First, initially we have to give 10 vials, sir.
No, supposing you are the first person to see the patient. If you are the first person to see the patient, how will you manage?
Yes. Sir, we have to assess his hemodynamics and blood pressure, and then we have to give fluid resuscitation.
Okay.
And we have to also see his breathing pattern. If he is in any respiratory failure, we have to give invasive ventilation, intubate and give invasive ventilation.
In any AKI situation, what will be the rules of the game, management-wise? Normally, we say that first identify the cause and treat in any other clinical situation. But in this AKI situation, what will be the thing?
Sir, fluid resuscitation we will do, sir.
Okay. No, I'm just asking a general principle of treatment of AKI. What will you see first?
Sir, in snake bite or otherwise AKI?
Any AKI, this is also an AKI, no?
Yes.
So first we have to look for the complications and treat them, because AKI complications are life-threatening. So we look for some complications and treat them. Of course, as you told, fluid resuscitation is important. We also have to immediately look for the complications and treat them in a AKI situation. Which are the complications which you are looking for in any AKI or in this situation?
Sir, hyperkalemia. Sir.
Okay.
Hyperkalemia we have to treat early, and severe metabolic acidosis. Severe metabolic acidosis.
Okay.
And fluid overload. If patient is having pulmonary edema.
Yes.
And
so
then,
basically, you are looking for hyperkalemia. Pulmonary edema is of course clinically it will be obvious.
Yes. And metabolic acidosis.
And then we need to look for the acidosis. So I just come to the fluid resuscitation you told. How do we do the fluid resuscitation? How do you assess for the fluid?
Sir, exactly two methods, sir. One is proven method, sir. One is passive leg raising test and see the IVC filling and then assess how much this thing. Another thing is we can give a fluid challenge and see the improvement in the cardiac output, stroke volume. If the real-time monitoring, if we give.
So how do I know that the patient is in dehydration?
Sir, the patient can have
Hypovolemia.
postural drop in the blood pressure.
Okay. So how to look for the postural drop?
Sir, first we have to see BP in the supine position, and then we have to ask the patient to stand, and within 3 minutes we have to recheck the blood pressure, and if the systolic BP drop more than 20 mm of Hg, then there is hypotension.
Yes. So either you can make the patient stand, but sometimes he cannot stand. You can make him sit for 2 minutes.
Yes,
if he is standing immediately, with sitting means it should be. You can wait for 2 minutes, and 20 by 10, 20 systolic or 10 drop in the diastolic.
Diastolic.
This thing. Obviously, if the patient is already hypotensive, you will not do that. The other thing what we look for hypovolemia.
Sir, skin trigger and mucosal mucosal surfaces.
Yeah, those are all soft signs. The other signs will be.
Sir,
the hard signs will be.
Sir, imaging on imaging there will be IVC collapsing will be there. Sir.
No, imaging we will not go immediately to imaging. Clinically, you can assess.
Sir, passive leg raising test there will be on leg raising. There will be increase in the blood pressure will be there.
Okay, so you can just change the position of the bed from the upright to you make the leg up and see. That is one thing. Other than that, no, it's not a trick question. I'm just asking you the signs of dehydration. You told postural hypotension. Other than that,
yes.
What about JVP?
Sir, JVP will be not raised, sir. JVP will be not raised.
Yeah, you will not see the. Yeah, you will not see the JVP, and if you give an abdominal pressure for 10 seconds, it may just come up. If it is mild hypovolemia, if it is severe, it may not come up at all. And then postural tachycardia. So when you are putting the patient in the upright position, if the pulse rate goes up by 10, it will be this one. And also the threadiness of the pulse. The pulse appears to be continuous. So thready nature of the pulse. So these are the three things we see: postural tachycardia, postural hypotension, and the appearance of and the non-appearance of a JVP. So in that situation, how much fluid we will give, and which fluid?
Sir, usually crystallites we will give, sir.
Yes.
And sir, this balanced solutions are more venous protective than the isotonic saline, sir.
Okay. Which balanced solution?
Sir, like plasma light.
Ringer lactate. You can give the ringer lactate. How much you will give?
Sir, in the resuscitation phase, we have to give fluid boluses of around 250 to 500 ml over 15 minutes, sir.
Yes.
Whereas in fluid challenge, we have to.
Up to how much you will give? Boluses, yeah, 250 ml. Up to how much you will give? Is there any recommendation?
Exact recommendation, not sure.
So 20 ml per kg. You have to give 20 ml per kg is the minimum amount you have to give. And if the patient is recovering, you can continue. And one more thing you could see, which I forgot to mention, is the checking the. What else you can check? Apart from the three things which I told, you have to check the. You have to check the weight of the patient. The weight is very important. So if the previous weight is known and if the weight has come down by at least 5%, we can say there is a dehydration. Okay, and
Okay.
the weight is very important for daily monitoring of the patient also. So if it is possible,
Yes.
in a situation where the patient is stable enough, you have to check the weight also. And once you
Yes.
give a fluid bolus, what are the things you are looking for? Basically, you have to be careful about some things, and also recovery you have to see.
Yes. Sir, we have to look for rise in the blood pressure and reduce in the heart rate and crackles. We have to see if there any patient is going for fluid overload.
Yeah. Yes. So you have to keep looking for the appearance of a pulmonary edema, because when we are resuscitating, we don't know as yet whether the patient has gone into a renal or intrarenal azotemia. So if that is the
Yes.
situation, the fluid will just fill up and it will cause a lung congestion. So we have to be very careful in that.
Yes.
So the first thing we see is the rise in the blood pressure. Okay, the
Yes.
rise in the blood pressure should be there. That should occur within half an hour. The second thing which you are
Yes.
looking for is, of course, the for the recovery. What will you see?
Sir,
You look for the urine output. So you have to monitor the urine output. The urine comes
yes.
about 100 to 200 ml. Urine comes within the first 2 hours, first 1 hour. Then we are safe enough to continue the IV fluids. Now, many a times what happens is the blood pressure improves. In this situation, the patient comes within half an hour, you have resuscitated, the blood pressure will improve. But the kidney AKI would already have set
Settled.
in.
Settled. Yes.
So how will you evaluate here? In that situation, we need to really look at the complications, which you have told. So how will you evaluate now?
Sir, we can give a trial of furosemide stress test. If with
Yeah.
furosemide,
How much
with
furosemide you give, and how will you give it?
sir, 20 mg of
How much you
Lasix.
will give?
Sir, 20 mg of Lasix IV we have to give, and we have to see urine output of around 100 to 200 ml within the first 2 hours. If it is there, then tubules are intact, and we say FST responsive, and the patient may improve without any need of RRT. If the tubules are not
Is
responding,
there a recommended dose?
hello sir, hello sir, hello.
Is there a recommended dose, and how should we be giving that for the furosemide?
Sir, it is 2 mg per kg bolus, sir.
1 mg per kg as a bolus, but it has to be given slow at the rate of 4 to 5 milligram per minute. You have to give it slowly to avoid the ototoxicity. 4 to 5 milligram per minute you have to give. And how much urine will come out?
Sir, 200 ml within 2 hours, sir.
Within 1 hour, at least 100 ml should be there. And if that is there, you could continue it if the patient is in fluid overload. Otherwise, do we need to continue the furosemide? Supposing it with the first bolus it does not come, what we can do? Should we give an infusion or something?
No, sir. Usually it is not responding, means then there is a likely chance of tubular necrosis. Then patient will benefit from renal replacement therapy.
Yes. So what is wrong in giving it continuously?
Sir, because there will be increased risk of ototoxicity will be there, sir.
No, more than that, some observational studies, they feel that mortality is higher if you continue the diuretics. So basically, the diuretic is given in a situation where there is a fluid overload, where you have to tackle the fluid overload immediately, or to determine whether the patient is pre-renal versus renal. So you just give a single dose, and we need to stop with that. Giving further doses usually will not work. The advantage of furosemide is it may convert an oliguric to a non-oliguric AKI. So in this situation, how common is oliguria versus non-oliguria? Once we go into the ischemic,
oliguria is more common, sir.
yeah, 90% of the time it is an oliguric AKI in a snake bite situation. Only 10% where it's milder one, it will be this
non-oliguric.
Yes. Non-oliguric. Yes. Now coming, just quickly tell me, how will you treat the complications? hyperkalemia, then pulmonary edema, and acidosis.
Sir, hyperkalemia, first we have to see the ECG and see the changes. If there are ECG
Okay.
changes like ECG changes, like we have to give IV calcium gluconate to
What are the
stabilize
ECG
the
changes
cardiac
you are looking
membrane.
at?
Sir, PR segment prolongation, sir,
Okay.
and
Not PR.
and
Okay. Now, what is the classical
sir,
changes?
sir, this short QT and mixing of the QRS complex with the T wave, forming of sine wave pattern.
Yeah, sine wave is the final change just before death. What is the earliest change which you will see?
Sir, PR segment prolongation.
PR means you have to calculate it. But just by seeing the ECG, we know that is hyperkalemia. How is that?
Sir, tented T waves, sir. Tented peak T waves.
Tall and peaked T waves.
Yes.
Tall and peaked
Yes,
T waves. Tall means?
Yes. Sir, the the QRS complex should be more than 2/3 of the T wave, sir.
No, the T wave should be more than 10 millimeters or it should be more than this thing. And classically, it will not be rounded, it will have a peak. So tall
Peak, sir. Yes, sir.
T wave.
Tented
So
T waves.
yes. So how will you treat the hyperkalemia medically?
Sir, we have to give calcium gluconate, 10% calcium gluconate, 10 ml over 10 minutes to stabilize the cardiac membrane. And then we have to give, to shift the intracellular shift, we have to give oscillin nebulization, beta 2 agonist. And then we have to give insulin along with the 25% dextrose. 10 units of insulin in 100 ml.
So Astalin, how much,
dextrose.
what is the dose of Astalin recommended for hyperkalemia?
Sir, it is 0.25 mcg every 25 minutes.
No. It is not like asthma treatment. 0.25 mcg, no. So 10 to 20 milligram. So normally we give less than 5 milligram for this asthma. Here it will be a double dose you have to give. And even then it may not work for in 40% of the patients. So better to give the, as you told, insulin dextrose. So how fast will these things work?
Sir, insulin dextrose, it will take 15 to 20 minutes, sir.
No, calcium gluconate?
Calcium gluconate within 10 minutes, sir. Immediately, it will work immediately, sir. After we give the calcium gluconate, membrane stabilizers will be there. And we can see the ECG.
So it acts within 3 minutes and the action lasts for about 30 minutes. Whereas the insulin dextrose will act within 15 minutes and last for 4 to 6 hours. And the beta agonists, they start acting by half an hour and the action lasts for 2 to 4 hours. But they are not very exact. So basically, recommendation is to give them together. As you give the nebulization, you have to give the insulin and dextrose. In this situation, when will you decide to dialyze the patient? You have done 13 dialysis, no? When will you decide to dialyze the patient?
Sir, if the patient is having persistent hyperkalemia despite medical management, or if the patient is having severe acidosis with the pH less than 7 or bicarbonate less than 10.
Despite management means how long you can wait? Supposing I start medical management, how long should I wait to give the dialysis, or is it immediate?
Sir, if patient is having ECG changes and we have to still it is not improving after the medical management, then we have to give immediately. Sir, if the ECG changes are settled, we can wait for 6 to 12 hours.
So if the change is anything more than a tall T wave, any other change other than tall T wave, or if the potassium is more than 7, you have to immediately dialyze. You don't wait for the medical. You can give the medical treatment, but don't wait for it to work. You have to immediately dialyze because it takes some time for you to arrange the dialysis. So that's why we give the treatment, but we don't wait. But if it is just a high potassium up to 6 and there is no other, or just a tall T waves, we can just wait for 4 hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And another situation where we need an urgency is the acidosis. So acidosis, how will you treat metabolic acidosis?
Sir, we can give sodium bicarbonate infusion, sir. We have to calculate the sodium deficit with 0.5 into body weight into required deficit. And in that half of the dose, we have to give bolus, and the rest of the half we give as infusion over the next 12 hours.
So when do we start plan to dialyze if the patient is acidotic?
Sir, if pH is less than 7.1 and or bicarbonate less than 10.
Yeah, bicarb less than 15 or pH less than 7.2, or if there is acidosis which is causing
Sir, myocardial depression and rhythm disturbances.
Hypotension. So any situation where acidosis you feel is causing a hypotension, BP less than 100, we have to consider for dialysis immediately. And of course, the other situation is pulmonary edema, where we try diuretics, and if they don't work, we have to take up for dialysis. So what are the other indications for doing dialysis?
Sir, if patient is having uremic
You told that
encephalopathy.
hyperkalemia.
Yes. Sir, if patient is having uremic encephalopathy.
Okay. Then?
Or if there is a pericarditis,
Okay.
uremic pericarditis is there.
Yes. Then?
And if patient is having, if patient is not in this case, sir, otherwise if patient is taken any dialyzable poison or for
No, in this situation, what are the components of uremia when you decide to dialyze? Apart from the complicated ones like resistant hyperkalemia, acidosis, pulmonary edema, then
uremic encephalopathy
then you
and
told
uremic
pericarditis, encephalopathy.
Yes.
Yeah, and even in uremic gastritis and a bleeding diathesis is there,
Yes.
you could do this one.
Dialysis.
Yes.
Yes.
Now the antivenom which you are giving, how will you give?
Sir, we have to give slow infusion, sir, in 500 ml normal saline. 10 vials. First, we have to give
So
10
which
vials.
is the antivenom which is available?
Sir, it is polyvalent antivenom, sir, which consists of antivenom for all 4 major triads.
Yeah. So roughly 1 ml of that will neutralize how much of the venom of which snakes?
Sir, 1 ml of antivenom of it for Russell's viper it is 0.6, sir. For cobra it is 0.8 mg, and for krait I think 0.5, sir, 0.5 mg.
No, krait and saw scale it is 0.45. Russell's and cobra it is 0.6. So how much of the antivenom will give and how will we decide?
Sir,
as we mentioned earlier, it should be as fast as possible.
Yes, sir.
So any person with systemic envenomation or a very fast spreading local envenomation, we decide to give it. And
Yes,
the venom is not safe. And many
Yes,
of these people might have dry bites. So we need to take a call, how much to give and how do we decide to give it?
Sir,
how will you decide that patient is improving?
Sir, first we have to give 10 vials. Sir, WHO says we have to give 10 vials of the antivenom. It's a slow infusion, and we have to monitor for any allergic symptoms like rash or bronchospasm or hypotension. We have to see, and if it is there, then we have to give Avil and hydrocortisone, and we have to slow the infusion, or we have to stop completely, and then we have to restart once the symptoms are settled. If we are able to give complete the infusion completely, then we have to repeat after giving the infusion. After 20 minutes, we have to do the 20-minute whole blood clotting test. If the 20-minute whole blood
Yes.
clotting test is
So basically, yeah. So basically, people either follow a bolus or an infusion. Both of them have same outcomes, more or less same outcomes in terms of reaction. And giving a pre-test dose also will not help. But you can give a pre-medication with a.
Hello, sir. Hello. Hello, sir. Sir, not audible. Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Sir, your voice was not audible, sir. There was disconnection. Hello.
We follow a 10 plus 10 plus 10 kind, and then we can repeat another 10 vials. But what is the total? How do we decide the patient is improving?
Sir, based on the blood clotting parameters, or if it is a neurological case, based on the muscle power and the drooping of this, we can do for ptosis, we can do this ice cube test and also.
Yeah. Oh, basically, as soon as you start giving, the patient starts feeling better. There's a feeling of generalized well-being. And the first thing that will improve, that is within 30 minutes, is that wherever there was a bleeding, for example, from the fang mark it was bleeding, that bleeding will stop within 30 minutes. And then the liver will start producing the coagulation factors, which will pick it up within 6 hours. So basically, when you first give the 20 vials, and then you can reassess at 6 hours. If there is a continuing kind of derangement of the whole blood clotting time or a PT-PTT derangement is there, in that situation we can, APTT derangement is an intrinsic factor. So if there is there, you could repeat the vials. And one more thing which we need to be careful is that the patient may have initial recovery followed by, you have to always reassess.
Yes.
You have to follow it after 48 hours because there may be a rebound, because as the blood pressure improves, the perfusion of the bitten limb will improve and there will be a depot of the venom there which will start entering the system. So therefore we need to be very careful in this situation where you have to reassess at 48 hours for the parameters, and if it is there, we may need to give the antivenom again. So is there any indicator of how much antivenom may be required in the literature?
Sir, exactly, I'm not remembering, sir. I have read it in the WHO guidelines, but I'm not remembering now.
So on an average, it is told that the Russell's Viper requires a higher amount. It requires a higher amount. So there is an old literature in this. Somebody has given a range of 60 to 270 ml. So one bottle is taken as 10 ml. So this is 60 to 270 ml is the required, and on an average you may require 40 ml in patients who are in Russell Viper. Other Viper bites and things, it may be around 20 to 30 ml is required, but average 40, 60 to 270 is the range given in the old literature. Then if you are going to dialyze the patient, what are the precautions you have to take in this situation? So this kind of AKI comes under which category in terms of catabolism? If I take
hypercatabolism, hypercatabolism,
yeah,
hypercatabolic AKI.
It's a hypercatabolic. So hypercatabolic is defined by,
sir, rise in blood urea more. Sir, rise in blood urea more than 20 milligram per deciliter per day, or rise in creatinine more than 1 milligram per day.
It's 30 milligram blood urea more than 30, or creatinine more than 1, or
sir, it's phosphorus more than 0.5 milligrams. Sir.
Okay, no, any phosphorus which goes above 8, we take it as hypercatabolic. Then more than phosphorus, it is the
uric acid, sir. Uric acid.
Uric acid more than 15 milligram per deciliter at the start itself is hypercatabolic. But more than that, we look at the potassium and the acid. the potassium rise is more than 1 milliequivalent per day, or if the acidosis is falling more than 2 milliequivalents per day, we say it is a catabolic state, hypercatabolic state. And in that we have mild, moderate, and severe hypercatabolic states. So how any idea how we divide that?
No, sir.
So that is basically based on what is a urea. It's not done clinically, but just for the knowledge, it is a urea nitrogen appearance we take. Urea nitrogen appearance, which is over and above the diet proteins which you take. If the catabolism is there, there will be an extra protein loss, and there is a way to calculate that from the diet and also from the urine nitrogen loss, and also the dialysate nitrogen loss, and also from the daily production of the nitrogen. We have a formula. So if it is less than 6 grams, we say it is mild. 6 to 12 grams is moderate, and more than 12 grams it is severe. So which are the examples of this kind of severe hypercatabolic states, AKI states, apart from the snake bite?
Sir, severe sepsis.
So where you may need to give a more number of dialysis.
Sir, severe sepsis and burns and
which are the other states?
Crush injuries, sir. Crush injuries, burns,
rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis.
Yes.
Yeah, burns, rhabdomyolysis, then
severe sepsis, sir.
Then acute
endotoxic
severe sepsis shock. And acute severe pancreatitis. Sepsis. Acute pancreatitis.
Yes.
Yeah, and acute pancreatitis.
Yes. Hello, sir. Hello. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello. Sir, your voice is not audible.
Please continue. What is the prescriptions you will give?
Hello, sir.
Hello. What is the prescription for dialysis? What is the prescription of dialysis you will give?
Sir, if it is based on the hemodynamics, sir. If patient blood pressure is maintaining, we can give intermittent hemodialysis. If patient is having hypotension, we have to give either SLED or CRRT, sir.
Okay. So here what you have done?
Sir,
intermittent patient what you have given?
Sir, intermittent hemodialysis, sir. She was maintaining blood pressure, so IHD was given, sir.
Okay. So basically what orders you will give for the first 2 dialysis and then for the continued one?
Sir, initially we have to give nil heparin dialysis, sir, because the patient will be having a bleeding dialysis, so we have to give nil heparin dialysis.
Okay. What precautions you will take in the first 2 dialysis if the urea is very high?
Sir, we have to give a short duration dialysis in a co-current blood flow.
Okay.
With low blood flows and low dialysate flows, sir.
Yeah. So if the urea is more than 250, especially, the chances of a disequilibrium are more. So you have to give an inefficient dialysis. So in a normal situation, how much fall in urea you would expect if the dialysis is good?
Sir, if dialysis is good, we expect a 40% reduction, sir.
63%. The
URR, sir, yeah. 63%. URR is 63, sir. URR is 63. Sir.
So, but in this situation, you would want to give at anything less than 40%. So you use a smaller dialyzer. You calculate the dialyzer surface area based on 75% of the body surface area. Here you give a smaller size dialyzer and you give a co-current flow. The blood flow should be less. It should be less than 250 ml. And then, as you told, we give a saline dialysis. So basically, how the saline dialysis is done?
So saline dialysis is done initially. we flush the dialyzer with heparin, sir.
Okay.
And then we have to rinse with saline, and then we continue with saline dialysis. Every 15 minutes, we have to give the saline dialysis bolus some 100 ml, sir. 100 ml of saline. We have to
Approximately 250 ml every 15 to 30 minutes. And then you have to factor in that saline which you are giving into the ultrafiltration which you are
removing.
doing. And after the dialysis, you have to give a hypertonic solution like either a dextrose or a
25%
mannitol.
dextrose or a mannitol, sir.
Yes, yes. And in children, you can give some anti-epileptics because seizures can be there. Okay.
Yes.
And then whether if there is a hyperkalemia, what is the solution you will keep?
Sir,
Dialysate
keep sir, we'll keep a low potassium bath, that is potassium less than 2 milliequivalents per liter.
Yeah. So what baths are available?
Sir, we have baths of 2, 3.5 and 4.
No, only 0 and 2 we have. We don't have, in India at least, I don't think we can manipulate it to that extent. So it is not
sir,
safe
we have
to
3.5.
keep. Okay. Yeah, that's what. The manipulation is not very flexible. So 0 and 2 is what we have. So basically we avoid the 0 because of chances of arrhythmias. High chance of arrhythmia. So you need more closer monitoring. So you can give 2 also, but what I was expecting was whether you need to have a dextrose bath or a non-dextrose bath.
Sir,
do you have the dextrose in the dialysate?
Yes, sir. 100 mg will be there, sir. Up to 100 mg will be there, sir.
100 mg per deciliter is there. So in a hyperkalemia, do you want to have a dextrose bath or is it irrelevant?
Sir, it will be relevant, sir, because it induces insulin and further potassium shift will be there. So we have to give non-dextrose bath.
So yes, it's better to give non-dextrose bath
because
30% lesser removal of potassium. Yeah, lesser removal of potassium will be there if you are giving having a dextrose bath. So how much potassium gets removed during the dialysis? How much potassium gets removed during the dialysis? Can you tell how much potassium gets reduced with all the things which you have told till now, including dialysis?
Sir,
you
we
told
can achieve
calcium, gluconate. You told about insulin, dextrose. So each of them, how much potassium?
Sir, exact not sure. Values. For this beta 2 agonist and this exact not sure.
Yeah, tell me. Your voice got lost. Can you tell me what is the potassium with all the intervention? How much potassium comes down?
Sir, for dextrose, it is 1 milliequivalent per liter, sir.
Yes. 1 milliequivalent per liter. Yes. And for other things?
Aspirin exact value, not sir. Aspirin exact, I am not sure, sir. It is around 0.4 to 0.6.
Aspirin is about 0.5. 0.5, which lasts for about 2 hours. This one is about for 4 hours, 1 milliequivalent. And the other one, calcium?
Sir, calcium, it mainly stabilizes, sir, but I don't think there will be loss of dextrose.
So calcium will not reduce, it will just stabilize the
membrane, cardiac membrane.
Yeah, so it does not reduce. And this one, the resins will also reduce by about 0.5 to 1 per liter. What about dialysis?
Sir, dialysis, the first 2 hours of potassium, first 2 hours of hemodialysis, potassium will normalize, sir.
Okay. So we expect removal of again about 1.5. It removes at the rate of about 40 milliequivalents per hour. So one dialysis session will remove about 120 to 150 milliequivalents of potassium. It's the most effective this thing. And if you have to check the potassium after dialysis, how long after dialysis we'll check it?
Sir, after 4 hours. Sir.
Yeah, minimum 1 hour because there is a rebound which occurs from the tissue. So we take a minimum 1 hour. Now, quickly tell me how the recovery occurs in the snake bite AKI. What are the prognosis, like natural history?
Sir, sir, in patients with ATN, there will be initially polyuric phase will be there, sir.
Yeah, no, how long it takes? After how long we expect it?
Sir, for 2 weeks, sir. 2 weeks, the patient will be in oliguric phase.
So if the injury is mild, 10 to 14 days, sometimes it may take 3 weeks. So if the patient remains anuric or oliguric for more than 3 weeks, or if there is a severe anemia, severe hypertension, in that situation, what will we look for?
Sir, there is a high possibility of acute cortical necrosis.
Yeah, so we look for an acute cortical necrosis. How do you diagnose that acute cortical necrosis?
Sir, on the contrast enhanced CT, we will find the double rim appearance of the kidneys, sir, bilateral.
Okay, so it's a very classical sign where you get a central hypoperfusion with the sparing of the subcapsular and the juxtamedullary areas. Yeah, but many a times we can't do this kind of imaging because you cannot give the IV contrast. So,
sir, we can do Doppler, sir. Doppler also we can identify the that bubble echo, bubble Doppler we can give, sir.
Yes, so you can do a Doppler. Then what else? On an X-ray, can we make out a deep penetrated X-ray?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. What will you see?
After 4 weeks of cortical necrosis in the later phase, we can see the calcifications, sir.
Yes. So we see a typical eggshell type of calcification or a tram track type of calcification in the periphery.
Sir.
So that happens after 4 weeks. And the other method is by doing you can do a
biopsy, sir.
You can do a you can do a biopsy. What will the biopsy show? Just give me a quick, yeah.
Sir, we can see this ghost cell appearance will be there, sir, all over the kidney with the eosinophilic material.
It's a typical coagulative necrosis where the architecture is preserved, the cells are not there. The boundaries are there, the cells are not there. It's a coagulative necrosis, which we will see. And you can also identify sometimes the dystrophic calcification near the glomeruli. So that is the typical appearance. And sometimes the biopsy can be normal because it's a fatty thing. So the biopsy may be totally normal. Patient may be in renal failure. So it is a this thing. So what is the final outcome? Yeah, final outcome of snake bite AKI as per the literature.
Sir, around
so this will be the last question. You can.
Yes, sir. Around 30% patients may go for CKD, sir. Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Sir, around 30% patients will go for CKD, sir. Hello. Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello. I lost this thing. Just tell me the final outcome. Either it's either a recovery.
Yes, sir. Sir, around 30% patients will go for CKD, sir. Around 30% patients will go for CKD.
Yeah, that is as per the literature, around 20% will go for CKD, but usually it is a mild CKD. The ATN will recover.
Yes, sir.
Only if there is an acute cortical necrosis, the CKD is there. And as per the literature from India, it may go up to 20% in the form of a proteinuria, new onset of hypertension or a pre-hypertension, or a mild rise in the creatinine. That is, it is either in CKD 2 or 3 stage, it will be there. And then future, how they will progress. The data is there only up to 1 year post event. What is the mortality?
Sir?
Mortality
40%, sir. 40 patients with renal failure have 40% mortality rate, sir.
Yeah, it's not that high. Most of the literature says it's about 7 to 8%, but sometimes in some, as you told, in 1 or 2 studies, it has come to 40%. But usually what we see is the present treatment, the mortality is not that great. It's about 7 to 8% is there. How many people develop AKI? The incidence of AKI is how much?
Sir, in Russell's Viper, the incidence is very vast, sir. It is from 18 to 36% they have quoted, sir.
Yeah. No, it is about 5 to 30%. Only problem is that polyvalent vaccine venom, anti-venom is not very good against certain things like locally that pit vipers and that local snakes. That venom is different.
Yes, sir.
So in such situations, AK can go up to 80%, where the venom is not effective, but otherwise it's about 5 to 25%.
Okay.
So from my side, the questions, I think the time is 10:40 from my side is, I think I will stop here. I will request Professor Balla to give his comments.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Prabhu, for excellent bedside discussion. And you have covered most of the things, starting from bite to needle, then discussing big four syndromes, then pathogenesis of ATI in snake bite, and then about Schwarzman phenomena, hypersensitivity reactions, then in discussing in detail about pre-renal, how pre-renal goes to ATN, then discussing about rotation necrosis, Schwarzman phenomena, and myocarditis.